Good evening, everyone. I am back after a couple of days taking off. I've got some more updates that I'm doing for my computer. I'm going to be getting a webcam hopefully here fairly soon. I've got to look around to find a good one that meets the requirements I'm looking for. But right now, I have got some new software that I'm going to be working with, and I've got my speaker. I don't know if you can see it here for doing that. There you go, for doing my audio stuff. Mostly working with audiobooks and the like. But anyway, that's what I've been doing for the past couple of nights. So, hey, Robert, welcome aboard. I did want to give a brief shout out to the Ninth and Main Church of Christ. Was able to meet with them this morning at 11. Wow, lots of people coming on. That's awesome. Buck, Houston, welcome aboard. Stephen, we met. There was, I guess, probably 30 people there this morning, and we had a bit of a guest speaker. One of the men of the congregation was getting up. He hadn't done it too often before, and he was taking a shot at it, and he did a really good job, so I appreciate that as well. Anyway, tonight we're going to just do one chapter. It's a fairly long chapter, Genesis 31, and we're going to kind of see the parting of ways between Laban and Jacob. And, oh nice, I have two shirts like that. So I got my phone kind of set up a little bit higher tonight, but it's kind of hard to see the screen. So I'll move that. All right, that should work. I might look a little tilted to y'all because of it. Hey, Mom, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. So, but anyway, as always, I'm reading out of the King James. Got the ESV open for modern English, plus I'm testing the ESV to see how good it is. And then I have Hebrew open for reference. Don't think I'm going to need it tonight. There isn't any incredibly hard terms or names or anything like that. So, hey, Tracy, welcome aboard. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it too, Stephen. I talked to them afterwards, and they only had a few people there because a lot of them in their congregation are older, and so they're staying home. And hey, Thornton, good to see you. But I told them, it's like, look, until this thing passes and our own congregation starts back up their own services, I'm probably going to be meeting with you guys, and whatever y'all need me to do, I'm happy to help out. And they were pretty receptive towards that. So, hey, wife, welcome aboard. Anyway, Genesis 31. Speak louder. Okay, I think maybe the phone is too far away. I'm going to have to go back to my original position so my voice... There we go. Hey, Robert. So that way my voice carries to the microphone a little bit better. Is that better, Mom? Can you hear me better? Can y'all hear me better now that I've moved the phone closer? I had it better because the angle, I feel like I'm looking down at the phone. So hopefully this is better. Anyway, y'all will tell me here in a minute. All right, so Genesis 31, and we're going to start in... All right, yeah, I think it was because I had the phone too far away. I think that was the problem. So Genesis 31, starting in verse 1. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all his glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. So Jacob overhears Laban's sons talking about how Jacob somehow had taken away all of their father's stuff, all of his cattle, all of his riches and everything. That's their perception of it. That's not necessarily what's going on, but that's what Jacob hears. And so, and then Jacob looks at Laban, and Laban, hey Gary, welcome aboard. We're in Genesis 31. Jacob looks at Laban, and Laban appears to have been listening to what his sons have been kind of feeding him about Jacob. And it's not as favorable as it was before. And maybe Laban realizes that his attempts to trick Jacob and to take advantage of him haven't worked out as well. and so he's not as favorable. Remember when Jacob came in, he was a workhorse. He from starting by moving the stone off the well, all the way to he worked for a month for free. He was just doing a great job, and Laban was like, man, stick around. I'll pay you. Just because we're kin doesn't mean you get to work for free. I'll pay you for this. And that's where he got into the whole thing. And so Jacob was this guy that just, he was a homebody before, but when he gets here, for whatever reason, we kind of see a different side of him. He's just this good guy, this laborer, and he's well liked. Well, after being here for 20 years, things have started to turn around, and not through any fault of Jacob's, but just the situation. The fair winds are no longer blowing, as they say, and so we're going to see this kind of break that they have. One other thing I want to note here, and I'll come back to it, but just pay attention how the way that Jehovah speaks to Jacob is compared to Abraham and Isaac. And Jehovah said unto Jacob, return into your land of your fathers, and to your kinsmen, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock. So he calls his wives out to where he's out in the field, I guess away from accidental overhearing by anybody else, because he's going to keep this a secret. And he says unto them, verse 5, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And you know that with all my power I have served your father. Let his beard grow out. Yeah, definitely. And your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. So all this time, in the years that he's been there, Laban has deceived him 10 times, has lied. This isn't just, we read 3, but they were all kind of lumped together. Hey, Mark, welcome aboard. So they were all kind of lumped together, but it's actually 10 total times that Laban changes what he says, I'm going to pay you this, but then he changes it, and he's trying to cheat Jacob out of what Jacob has agreed upon as wages. He did it with Leah and Rachel. He wanted Rachel, and the guy gave him Leah. And then he did it with the different cows and the different goats and the different sheep and stuff. So that's what he's like, look, I've worked hard for your dad, and he's done nothing but try to cheat me at least 10 times. But God has not allowed him to hurt me by doing this. God is actually blessed. And God, Jacob's not saying here that Laban has tried to physically hurt him. What he's saying is that through this deceit, that Laban was not allowed to, that God didn't allow Laban's shenanigans to have fruition. It actually worked against him. Hey, Tracy, welcome aboard. So, verse 8, he kind of explains this. He says, if he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle were speckled. And if he said, the ring-straked shall be your hire, then all the cattle were ring-straked. So God has taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. So anytime Laban tried to trick Jacob by saying you can only have the ones that aren't pure of coat, then God blessed the cattle that were not pure of coat, and they ended up having stronger and healthier and more than what the pure of coat had. So Laban got what he asked for, but he didn't gain the advantage. So verse 11, and the angel of God, remember we've talked about this, the angel of God, I believe, is actually, you'll see the way that the angel of God converses with Jacob here. The angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes. Remember that he said, that's the angel of God. And the angel of God said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban does unto thee. I am the God of Bethel. So remember, this is the angel, the messenger of God, is saying this. I am the God of Bethel. So who is this? Who is this messenger of God that we're talking about here? Well, this is God the Son. The God the Son has always been the go-between between man and God the Father. And I think that's what we call a theophany. But this is before God the Son is born of Mary and becomes human. He still was interactive and had a very active role in what was going on during the Old Testament times, especially in conversing with mankind. So this messenger, this angel of God, in this particular case, is no less than God the Son. And so he says, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillars, and where thou vowedst a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return into the land of thy kindred. And so here's where I want to bring up the difference. In the past, we've seen, for instance, we go back to the idea of Abraham. When Sodom and Gomorrah were going to be destroyed, how did Jehovah come and talk to Abraham? Well, he appeared to him as a man. Remember, he shows up with the other two celestial angels. They all appear as men, and the two angels go on to Sodom and Gomorrah to take them out. And God actually stays back and kind of chats with Abraham a little bit. So there's this direct personal relationship in the way that Jesus and the apostles during the first century had that kind of sit down and talk to you relationship, the way that Adam and Eve had that relationship with God, that personal direct communication. And Isaac was the same way. The Logos, the Word. And so you see that with Isaac. And Isaac, we don't ever hear about him talking to God through dreams or God talking to him through dreams. But here, Jacob kind of distanced himself from God at first. And we talked last time about how he had to make his father's faith his own. Well, here, you don't have that direct communication. God has kind of taken another step back from mankind. And I see as the numbers are growing, the numbers of people that are being dealt with growing, God takes a step back. And we're going to see he continues to talk through individuals, but he does it through dreams now, or he's going to do it through special occurrences, or he's going to do it through a singular leader like Moses, and no longer to the patriarchs of the individual people, or later through the prophets. So it's just an interesting observation to see how God is changing the way that he communicates to man during this time period. So verse 14, and Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? And in other words, is there anything left here for us? You've got all the good stuff. So, we're not wanting to stay here. Are we not counted of him as strangers? For he has sold us, and has quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God has said unto thee, do. So they're saying that what our dad has separated us from himself. He's kind of blown his wealth. Hey, Robert, welcome aboard. We're studying the book of Genesis. He has spent all the money. He's tried to trick you, and God has blessed you instead. So everything that we would have in the way of wealth, if we tried to stay here, there isn't anything really left. We would rather go with you. So, whatever God said to do, you do that, because obviously God has blessed you. And so they're kind of giving, their agreement to that. I found it really cool that Jacob is bringing them in on this. He's not just, we're going to do this and, whatever, but he's like, look, we can talk about this. Your dad's been taking advantage of me. We got to split. God's come to me in a dream. He's told me to split, and they don't argue. They are in full agreement. And so they all kind of make a plan and get ready to go. So, verse 17, then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Paddan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. So he packs everybody up. And then verse 19, Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Now, I've been saying since Abraham left in chapter 12, that while these people knew of Jehovah, and I think to an extent kind of served him, they also had access to these pagan gods, or these idols, these fake gods. And here's where we see evidence of that. I don't know that Terah himself had it, or Nahor, or some of the Haran, or some of these other guys specifically worship these, but we do know that that was in that region, because Laban is one that he knows of Jehovah God, but he also has these fake images and stuff, these idols. And so Rachel grabs them, and she puts them in her pack or whatever. We aren't told why. The Bible never comes out and says why Rachel stole those. Maybe as a lesson to Laban, hey, stop worshiping false gods, pay attention to Jehovah God. Or maybe we don't see any indication of her ever worshiping using these. So it wasn't for her personal use that I could see in Scripture. But we just flat aren't told. And so while we could speculate, the Bible doesn't say, so there's nothing that we could say definitively about why she took them. We're only told that she does. And Moses doesn't see fit to record that, only to give us kind of what was going on here as Jacob's splitting away from Laban. So verse 20. Hey, Miss Hobbs, we're in Genesis 31, and I'm in verse 20. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, and that he told him not that he had fled. In other words, he didn't tell Laban. He just kind of crept away while Laban was out with the sheep, and he took off. And so he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. That river there is the Euphrates. If you have a map and you're kind of following along with all of this, or you use that Bible Atlas website that I told you about, they're coming down from the Syrian region out a little bit more east, and they come across the Euphrates down south into the land of Canaan. Hey, Josh, welcome aboard. And so they're coming across the Euphrates River, and they're coming into Gilead. And then it was told Laban on the third day, so 3 days head start, that Jacob was fled. But remember, Jacob's got camels, and he's got women, he's got children, and he's got cattle, and he's got all of this stuff that's going to slow him down. So Laban's going to be able to catch up with him. And he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. So Laban grabs his brothers, his kinsmen, his relatives, and they form a posse, and they don't have anything to slow him down. And so they catch him after 7 days, and they catch him at Mount Gilead. And God came to Laban. Now, of course, Gilead we're going to read about quite a bit when we get into like the books of history and all of that. There's even a song. There's a balm in Gilead. We'll talk about that when we get there. But this idea of Gilead we're gonna see as a reoccurring theme here. So, and God came to Laban the Syrian in dream by night, and said unto him, Take heed that you speak not to Jacob either good or bad. All right. Now here's the deal. God is speaking to Laban directly, and he speaks to him in a dream. And when I say directly, I mean that God is actually communicating. He's not sending another person. He's not sending a prophet, or he's not sending a person like Gabriel or whatever, but God is speaking directly to Laban, but he's doing it through a dream. Again, Stephen, we're not sure what reason, and she's not even accused of anything, of doing any wrong. It's just she took them, and that's it. That's all we know. So, but anyway, Laban gets this message from God, so we know that he knows God is real, because God's talking to him, and he listens to God. He is like, whatever, God, I'll do what you said. Hey, Sean. And so we're not, even though Laban worships these false gods, he's not separated from Jehovah God completely as an idea. Jehovah is not a foreign entity to him. And so then Laban overtook Jacob, verse 25, and Jacob pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have stolen away unawares to me and carried away my daughters as captives, taken with the sword? Wherefore did you flee away secretly and steal away from me, and did not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth and with songs and with tabret and with harp, and has not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing." So Laban's like, why did you leave the way that you did? Why did you take my daughters? Why did you take, and that sons there again generic? He's talking about his grandsons, his descendants here, and why did you that word steal away is the idea of sneaking away in the kind of the spy kind of way. We're gonna tiptoe out of here so Laban doesn't know that we're here, and he's like, why did you take my daughters away, as if they were some kind of captive that you took with a sword, like you were some kind of raider. And he's like, if you were going to leave, I would have thrown a big party. We could have had some songs and celebration and stuff, and then sent you off in the right way. Why did you leave? But then he comes in verse 29 and says, "It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt." So what is Laban saying here? He's accusing him that, why did you leave? I'm the father of your wives. I'm the grandfather of your children. You could have left with all this partying, but it's in my power to hurt you. Well, that's a threat. And so we kind of see the real Laban peeking through, except he says, "But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad." So I want to talk about this for just a moment. Number one, he threatens him and then implies that if God hadn't said anything to me, I probably would have done you harm. It's within my power to do you harm, but God said don't do it. Okay? And he says, the God of your father. Notice he's not claiming ownership of God. He doesn't belong to Jehovah. And so we know that Laban isn't a follower of God. He knows of him and even accepts that he's real and communicates with him, and that he's real enough that Laban is going to listen to him and do what he says. But he doesn't belong. There's not that claiming of my God in that sense. And so he says, don't speak good or evil. So what is God actually commanding Laban to do? Well, don't speak evil. That means don't threaten him. Don't talk bad to him. Don't be mean to him. Those kinds of things. But what about good? And I think what's going on here, given who Laban is and what Laban has done in the past, I think what God is wanting Laban to not do is to offer bribes or more of the same of that kind of trickery. Well, come on back, and I'll give you this, and then try to trick Jacob again. I think that's really where this is going. God has told Jacob, get your family, get your belongings, and go back to the land that I promised to your fathers. And he doesn't want Laban trying to convince Jacob to stay. I think that's the good side of that. So, right. Well, and obviously Laban is able to talk just a little bit. He's able to say some things because he continues on and he actually goes to Jacob and speaks to him, but he doesn't threaten him in an overt way. Hey, Arthur, welcome aboard. He doesn't threaten him in an overt way. I think there's like the kind of backhanded threat there, but he also doesn't say, come on back and I'm going to offer you this. I'm going to give you this. I'm going to bless you this way or whatever. He's just asking him questions. Why did you sneak off? And so, verse 30, and now thou, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? So now we have, he says, all right, I get it. You want to go back to your father's house. And he's allowing Jacob an out because God told him don't threaten him and don't try to bribe him back or don't try to speak good to him. So he gives him an out, a reasonable reason to head back to that thing. But then he says, but you've stolen my gods. And now he's claiming ownership here. He's claiming that belonging. And when I say ownership, I don't mean in the master-slave kind of ownership. We don't own God. But when I say ownership, I mean a belonging. Like when I say my family, or if I were to say my school, or if I were to say my church. I don't own those things, but I belong to those things, or I have a relationship with those things. And that's what we mean by my in this context. So he says, you've stolen my gods. And he's talking about those little islands that Rachel, or the little idols that Rachel has. So verse 31, Jacob answered and said unto Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure you would take by force thy daughters from me. That's why I left the way I did, is I thought you were going to take your daughters back from me by force. But he says, Jacob says, with whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. So he's assuming it's a servant. Before our kinsmen, discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. So he makes this decree in front of everybody. Hey, whoever took your gods, you bring them out and show us in front of everybody. And that person, they don't live. They've stolen something, you can put them to death. And he doesn't realize that his wife is the one that took them. And so Laban went into Jacob's tent. Notice the way that Jacob speaks, he's intimating that one of his servants has done it. But the first person that Laban checks out is Jacob's tent. So again, there's more of that friction and that implied threat. And then into Leah's tent, and then into the two maidservants' tents. But he found them not. So why did he go into Rachel's tent last? Maybe Rachel is a favored daughter here. So he entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture, the kind of what they mean there is the saddle, and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. She was having her period. And he searched, but found not the image. So Jacob, hey Rosalind, Laban is searching for these gods. And so he searches all of these tents, and he comes to Rachel, and he allows her to convince him, hey, I'd get up, but please don't make me. It's during my period. I don't feel like getting up. And Laban doesn't make a big deal out of it, and he does not make her get up. And so he doesn't find the gods because she's sitting on them. So verse 36, and Jacob was mad. He was wroth and chode with Laban. That means he chewed him out. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? In other words, why did you've accused me of these things? Why did you come after me? Hey, Susan, welcome aboard. And, what did I do wrong? Because remember, Jacob's been a good guy. He's done all that he was a great worker for Laban, married his daughters and everything. So why are you pursuing me is what Jacob's asking. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren. In other words, our two families. Let's look at what you have that we allegedly stole, that they may judge between us. And so Jacob's just letting him have it. This 20 years have I been with you. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beast I did not bring unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. In other words, anytime anything bad happened, I absorbed the loss. I was a good worker for you. I worked for 20 years and was the best that I could be for you. He says, verse 40, thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and frost by night. In other words, the heat of the day and the cold of night. And my sleep departed from my eyes. I lost sleep working for you. Thus have I been 20 years in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 more years for your cattle, and you have changed my wages 10 times. So he's confronting him now. Jacob's mad because Laban has given this last little, hey, you guys stole something from me and you're creeping out of here. And then Jacob's like, of course I'm creeping out of here. I was afraid that you were going to try to cheat me yet again. You were going to take back your daughters, and you've changed my wages all of this time. You are not a good person, and so of course I'm leaving. That's what Jacob is doing, is just letting him have it. And then he says, verse 42, and here's where it comes out: except the God of my fathers, the God of Abraham, and the fear. That word fear there is still talking about God. The fear of Isaac. In other words, God is powerful and could have done unto Laban whatever God wanted to do. Had been with me. In other words, except God had been with me, surely you had sent me away now empty. If God hadn't been with me, I would have left pretty much the way that I came. I would have had nothing. But God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you the other night. He came to him in a dream and told him, hey, don't go to Jacob and speak to him this way or that. And so Jacob is just laying it out and has called him to the mat on it and said, look, I've been great and you have been awful. So Laban answers, verse 43, and Laban answered, said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, talking about the grandchildren, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. Okay, so he's claiming ownership here. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? So what he's saying is that I've not come to hurt. I've not come to punish them. They're my daughters. They're my grandchildren. I'm not gonna hurt them. And so Laban's kind of backpedaling here. He's like, I don't mean them any harm. He's like, as far as I'm concerned, these guys are as if they were my own. They are my daughters. They are my grandchildren. And so he's saying, look, I don't mean any harm. So he's kind of backpedaling here, and he's realizing Jacob is powerful, and he's backed by a really powerful deity. And Laban doesn't understand the full power of God, but he understands that Jehovah is real, and real enough to be talking to him and blessing Jacob in a very evident way. And so he's kind of probably figured out now that if he doesn't fix this, he's probably never going to see his daughters or his grandchildren ever again. And so he's like, okay, hey, no, I get it. You're angry. Come, let's make a covenant, you and me, and let it be for a witness between me and you. So verse 44, and Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. I guess that's what they did for their covenants. We sign a contract these days, but they do pillars. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones, and they took stones and they made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And so just to get an idea over here, nope, they still call it a heap. It's basically kind of I don't know. It's not a plateau, but a dais kind of thing. They're setting it up, and they're eating up out of the mud, and they're getting up onto the rocks and stuff. And so they're going to have this meal to kind of solidify their agreement here, their covenant. So they ate upon the heap, and Laban called it Yeger Sahadutha. But Jacob called it Gilead. I'm going to go with Jacob because Gilead's easier to say. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Gilead. So that word Gilead there, I guess we can look up those two words. I read through it, then I wasn't going to look them up. But now that I'm struggling saying them, I'm going to go ahead and look it up. So Yeger Sahadutha, which is apparently two words or a broken up word. The witness heap, real original with their names here. And then Gilead means the witness heap. So maybe those are two different languages here. So let's see here. Yeger Sahadutha, witness heap. and witness heap. So they mean the same thing, but they're derived different. So Yeager Sahadutha is Aramaic. That's why. So Aramaic is the Bible is written in 3 different languages. You have Hebrew, you have Aramaic, and you have Greek, the Koine Greek. The Aramaic is a language that was in the region. You see a lot of the Babylonian type era written in Aramaic, and it was kind of considered a Wiseman type language. Very similar to Hebrew. They come from the same root, but the Aramaic and the Hebrew were distinct languages, kind of like we might think of the Romance languages, where they all come from Latin, but Spanish is different than French, or you have Spanish is different than Portuguese. So those all have the same root language in Latin, but they're actually different languages. And then anyway, so the 2 words mean the same thing, different languages. I'm definitely going to go with the Hebrew Galid because it is way, way, way easier to say. Heap of testimony, witness heap, those kinds of things is basically where they made the covenant. And then Mom says also called Mizpah, which is outlook point or lookout point. Yeah. Hey Doug, welcome aboard. So haven't got there yet, but yeah, they're definitely gonna call it that. So Laban said, verse 48, Laban said, "This heap is a witness between me and thee this day, therefore was the name of it called Galid." That's Moses saying, hey, we call it Galid because we speak Hebrew. And Mizpah, that's what Mom was saying, that it's called outlook point. For he said, "The Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent from one another." So Laban is talking here, and so he says we're going to call it Mizpah too, because Jehovah is going to watch over us when we're not around each other. So this is what Laban says: heap and pillar were a double witness between the 2 men. Neither was to cross these symbols in order to harm the other. Right? Yeah, they're gonna say that later on. Mom's getting ahead of me here. So here's what Laban says, the last 6 verses. "If you will afflict my daughters, or if you shall take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness between you and me." In other words, here's the covenant that we're going to make. You're not going to take any more wives. God is the witness between us. And Laban said to Jacob, "Behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have put between me and thee. This heap be a witness, and this pillar be a witness." So there's the double witness that Mom was talking about. "That I will not pass over this heap to thee, and thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm." That doesn't mean they couldn't go past it, but they could not come past it for harm. And so the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their father judged between us. So apparently Nahor worshipped God, and Laban has not. Laban has not taken on the faith of his forebears. So, and Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. So again, more distancing by Jacob from God right now. Still a little bit immature in that he's really focusing here more on it's the God of Abraham, it's the fear of Isaac. He's still he is a worshiper of Jehovah. He is a follower of God, but there's still a little bit of that. Well, it's my father's God. And so that's the way that it's presented here. And it's interesting that Moses presents this way because what he's going to see, and we're going to see this so many times going from Genesis all the way up through the New Testament, how the Jews claimed or clung to their Israelite nature. We are descended from Abraham. He is the God of Abraham. He is the God of Isaac. He is the God of Jacob. And it's not so much he's our God. And so there's this weird kind of name dropping kind of attachment that they have to God. They don't worship God because they want to worship God and they want to have this covenant relationship with God individually. It's that they worship God because he was the God of Abraham, a God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And I think Moses is pointing this out here in the way that he presents this, is just this kind of subtle, hey, look, Jacob's swearing by the way that he it's his father's God. So anyway, just an interesting observation here. We see it from time to time. We'll see it a lot more as time progresses throughout history here. So verse 54, then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount and called his brethren, his kinsmen, to eat bread, and they did eat bread and tarried all night in the mount. So kind of a party, and then they stay there in the mount that night. And early in the morning, Laban rose up, and he kissed his grandsons and his daughters and granddaughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned into his place. So lots of tension, lots of bad blood, all of it Laban's fault at this point. Everything we see of Jacob has been, for the past 20 years, he's been just this great guy. And we don't have any indication that he was anything but that. But Laban took advantage of him, treated him bad. And so Jacob had enough. He left. And he comes after him. But God kind of calms him down, cools him down. And so he says, all right, we're going to part in peace. And so they do. They part in peace. So they thought that because not all of the Israelites received the blessings of the promise meant that the promises failed. They missed the whole point of the promise altogether. The point of the promise was that they would be the vehicle to bring Messiah into the world and bless all the nations. And they accomplished that. God held them together long enough to accomplish his promise to Abraham, so they can get over it. They really can. So anyway, that's Genesis 31. It was a long chapter. I don't want to go any further tonight. So thank y'all for joining me, and I'll get these up and the last few ones up on YouTube here in the next couple of days. And hopefully tomorrow we'll have time for 32 and maybe 33. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will get to them. Feel free to share. Tom, you're catching us at the end here, man. You're going to catch it on the watch back. So, but share if you like this, and thank y'all. We'll see y'all next time.